Imagine a life-changing moment that completely shifts your understanding of divine protection. I used to think God's protection was simply about avoiding danger. But then something happened that opened my eyes to a whole new dimension of divine guardianship. It was an ordinary Sunday morning when my car broke down on the way to church. Frustration mounted as I waited for help, and that's when a stranger approached me. Initially, I was apprehensive, but his words soon shook me to my core. This man spoke about God's protection in ways I had never imagined. He revealed that divine protection isn't just about shielding us from harm, it's also about guiding us, growing us, and expressing His love in the most unexpected ways. That encounter transformed my understanding of what it truly means to be under God's care. In today's video, I'm sharing 7 clear signs that you are under God's protection, signs that have changed my perspective and might just change yours too. These revelations will show you how God's safeguarding presence manifests in ways you might not have noticed before. Prepare to be surprised and enlightened as we explore the divine signs that indicate you've been watched over in ways beyond the ordinary. The whisper in the storm. Recognizing the first sign of divine protection. Ever felt a sudden, unexplainable peace while everything around you seems to be falling apart? That's what I call the whisper in the storm. I recall a time when my world felt like it was unraveling. Bills were piling up, my job was in jeopardy, and my family was struggling. It felt like a tornado of troubles was tearing through my life. Yet amidst the chaos, something extraordinary happened. I experienced an unexpected calm. That calmness, despite the turmoil, is the first clear sign of divine protection. When life hurls its worst at you, but you find yourself with an inner peace that seems out of place, it's like God is whispering, "I've got you," even as the storm rages around you. This isn't about being happy during hard times. It's about a profound stillness in your soul that defies explanation. It's the kind of peace that might make others wonder how you're managing to stay composed when everything seems to be falling apart. As Philippians 4:7 puts it, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Imagine a peace so profound that it defies logic, a peace that makes no sense to your mind but feels deeply true to your heart. Take Sister Mary from our church, for example. When her husband of 40 years passed away unexpectedly, we all expected her to be overwhelmed with grief, but instead she had a remarkable sense of calm. Sure, she was sad, but there was an unshakable strength in her. When I asked her about it, she simply said, "I can feel God's presence around me. I know He's guiding me through this." That's what divine protection feels like. It's not always about preventing hardship. Sometimes it's about giving you the resilience to face it. It's God's way of saying, "I'm here with you, no matter what." So when you encounter a crisis and suddenly experience that unexpected inner calm, don't dismiss it. That's God's protection at work, reassuring you even in the storm. If you're thinking, "But I don't feel that peace. Does that mean God isn't watching over me?" Hang tight, because the next sign we'll explore could answer that. It's about how closed doors can lead to new opportunities, and it might change the way you see God's hand in your life. Doors closing, windows opening. Sometimes God's protection isn't quite what we expect. Remember how I talked about doors closing and windows opening? That's the second unmistakable sign of God's guidance in your life. You might be wondering, how can a closed door be protection? I used to question that too. But here's the thing. Sometimes God shuts a door to keep us from walking into something dangerous. Take Sarah, a young woman from our church. She was thrilled about a job offer she thought was her dream job. But just before she could accept it, the offer fell through. She was heartbroken and cried for days. Fast forward a few months, and it turned out that the company was involved in some shady dealings. If Sarah had taken that job, she might have ended up in a difficult situation. That's how God works, seeing beyond what we can and protecting us from what we don't yet know. So, if you find a door closing in your life, don't be disheartened. Look around. You might just find that God is opening a window you hadn't noticed before. Not every closed door is necessarily a sign of God's protection. Sometimes, a closed door is just a closed door. But when you start to notice a pattern of doors closing and then better opportunities opening up, that's when you know God's hand might be at work. Consider Joseph from the Bible. His brothers sold him into slavery, a massive, unexpected closed door. Yet through those trials, God eventually elevated him to be second in command in Egypt. Those closed doors were part of a bigger plan, preparing Joseph for something greater. I've experienced this myself. There was a time I was all set to move to another state for a new job. Everything was in place, but suddenly, the entire plan fell apart. I was furious and felt abandoned, but just a few weeks later, I met the woman who would become my wife. If I had moved, I might never have crossed paths with her. That's the essence of God's protection. It's not always about avoiding physical harm. Sometimes it's about guiding us away from paths that aren't right for us and leading us towards something far better. So, when a door closes in your life, don't lose hope. Look around. God might be opening a window you haven't yet seen, protecting you from unseen challenges or leading you toward unexpected blessings. You might be asking, how can I tell if it's really God's protection and not just bad luck? That's where our next sign comes into play, the guiding light of wisdom. This insight can transform the way you recognize God's hand in your daily decisions. The guiding light of wisdom. Imagine this guiding light of wisdom as a sudden, brilliant idea that hits you at just the right moment. It's those times when you're facing a tough choice and, out of the blue, you suddenly know exactly what to do. I remember when I was about to seal a major business deal. Everything seemed perfect, but something felt off. I couldn't quite place it, but as I was about to sign the contract, a thought flashed through my mind. Check the fine print. When I did, I discovered a clause that would have cost me a fortune. That was God's protection at work. It's not always about avoiding physical danger. Sometimes, it's about providing the wisdom to steer clear of spiritual, emotional, or financial pitfalls. So next time you find yourself with a sudden flash of clarity or a nagging feeling guiding your decisions, don't ignore it. That's the guiding light of wisdom, a sign of God's protection, helping you avoid unseen traps and make choices that lead you to greater safety and success. The Bible is filled with stories of this kind of protection. Take Solomon, for example. When God asked him what he wanted, Solomon didn't ask for wealth or power. He asked for wisdom. God was so pleased that he blessed Solomon with extraordinary wisdom, which safeguarded him and his kingdom for years. Then there's Daniel, who was in a foreign land surrounded by people who didn't share his beliefs. Yet, God granted him wisdom that not only protected him, but also set him apart as a standout among the king's advisors. This kind of divine protection often shows up as enhanced discernment. It's like God fine-tuning your spiritual antenna, helping you notice things you might have missed before. You start making better decisions and sidestepping pitfalls that could have tripped you up in the past. But here's the catch. This protection requires something from us too. We need to be open and willing to listen. Sometimes that means being still, diving into God's word, or humbly asking for guidance. So, if you want to experience this kind of protection, stay attuned to those moments of clarity and wisdom. They might just be God's way of steering you in the right direction and keeping you safe from unseen dangers. I know some of you might be thinking, but I don't feel wise, I mess up all the time. Let me reassure you, we all make mistakes. That doesn't mean you're not under divine protection. Often wisdom comes after the mistake, through the lessons we learn and the growth we experience from our struggles. So when you're faced with a tough choice, take a moment, pray for wisdom, and stay open to those sudden flashes of insight. They might just be God's way of guiding you through something unseen. Now you might be asking, what if I don't have any big decisions right now? How can I recognize God's protection in my daily life? That's where our next sign comes in. Unlikely guardians. This one is about the surprising people God places in our path, and it'll reveal how He's working in ways you might not have noticed before. Unlikely guardians. You might think, I haven't had any dramatic moments of wisdom, but let me share the fourth sign of God's protection with you. It's something you might have missed, but it's happening all around you. Unlikely guardians. Sometimes God's protection doesn't arrive as a grand revelation. Instead, it appears through ordinary people who show up in your life at just the right time. They might not have wings or halos, but they're doing God's work in their own special way. I remember a time when I was really struggling, lost my job, bills piling up, and feeling like I was at my lowest. Out of the blue, a neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door and said she felt led to bring over some groceries. Can you believe it? This woman, whom I had hardly spoken to before, showed up with exactly what I needed at the perfect moment. That's God's protection in action. He often uses the most unexpected people to watch over us, guide us, and help us when we're in need. The Bible is full of stories like this. Take Ruth and Naomi. Ruth wasn't just Naomi's daughter-in-law. She became Naomi's protector and provider when they were both widowed. Or look at Rahab, a woman with a shady past, who ended up safeguarding God's people and became part of Jesus' lineage. God's protection often comes from the most surprising sources. Think about that person you've been avoiding at church. They might have the exact word of encouragement you need. Or that co-worker you don't get along with. They might be the one to steer you away from a poor decision. I've seen it happen over and over. A stranger offers a timely word of support when someone's on the brink of giving up. A new friend appears just when loneliness strikes, or an old contact reaches out with a job offer when hope seems lost. These aren't mere coincidences. This is God working behind the scenes, placing people in your path to guide and protect you on your journey. I know some of you might be thinking, I haven't encountered anyone like that. But let me ask you this, have you been paying attention? Sometimes we're so focused on waiting for a grand miracle that we miss the small miracles happening all around us. It could be the cashier who offers a warm smile when you're having a rough day, the driver who lets you merge in traffic when you're running late, or the neighbor who volunteers to mow your lawn when you're under the weather. These might seem like minor things, but they're significant. They're God's way of showing you that He's looking out for you, protecting you in ways you might not even notice. So, keep your eyes peeled for those unexpected guardians in your life. And remember, sometimes God might be calling you to be that guardian for someone else. You never know when a small act of kindness might be God using you to protect someone in need. Now you might be asking, how can I be sure these people are truly sent by God? That's where our next sign comes in. It's all about the shield of faith, and it's going to change the way you perceive God's protection in your everyday life. And the shield of faith. You might be wondering, what if I don't see these unexpected guardians in my life? Well, let me introduce you to the fifth sign of God's protection, something you already possess, the shield of faith. Sometimes, God's protection isn't about what's happening around us, but what's happening within us. It's that unshakable strength that emerges when everything else seems to be falling apart. That's the shield of faith in action. I recall a time when it felt like my world was crashing down. Lost my job, bills were stacking up, and I felt completely overwhelmed. Yet, amidst the chaos, I experienced an unexpected strength and an unshakable certainty that God would see me through. And guess what? He did. That's God's protection. It's not always about preventing challenges. Sometimes it's about giving you the courage to face them head-on. The Bible is packed with stories showcasing this kind of protection. Take David facing Goliath. He should have been terrified, but his faith was his shield. He knew God was with him, and that gave him the strength to confront the giant. Or think about Daniel in the lion's den. Imagine being thrown in with hungry lions, yet Daniel's faith was so powerful, it acted as a shield, and the lions couldn't harm him. When your faith is strong, it acts like a shield against fear, doubt, and despair. It's as if God is saying, I've got you. No matter what comes your way, I'm right here with you. But here's the catch. This kind of protection requires effort from us too. We need to nurture and strengthen our faith. It's like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. You might be thinking, but my faith feels weak. I don't feel strong. That's something we all experience at times, but it doesn't mean God isn't protecting you. Often, it's in our moments of weakness that God's strength shines the brightest. Remember Paul's words, "When I am weak, then I am strong." When we're at our lowest, we rely on God the most, and that's when His strength becomes our own. So, next time you're facing a challenge, remember the shield of faith. It's not about always feeling strong. It's about trusting that God's strength is more than enough to carry you through anything. You might be asking, what if I'm not dealing with any major challenges right now? How can I see God's protection in my daily life? That's where our next sign comes in, divine detours. This one is about recognizing how God's protection can show up in ways you might not expect. Divine detours often look like inconvenience. I'm talking about those annoying delays and sudden changes in plans that make you want to scream. But these frustrations might actually be divine detours. You might be thinking, how can a missed flight or a traffic jam be God's protection? Hang with me for a moment. This sixth sign is easy to miss, but it's important. Think about that time your alarm didn't go off and you were late for work, or when your car broke down and you missed a big meeting. At the time, it felt like everything was going wrong. But what if those seemingly negative events were actually God protecting you from something you couldn't see? I'll never forget the day my friend Sarah was running late for her flight. She was devastated, fearing she'd miss her sister's wedding. Later, we found out that the plane she was supposed to be on had serious engine trouble. God's protection doesn't always look neat and tidy, folks. He sees what we can't, knowing what's ahead, even when we're just focused on our plans. Sometimes He has to disrupt our plans to keep us safe. Take Joseph in the Bible, for example. His brothers sold him into slavery, a major detour, yet God used that very situation to save an entire nation from famine. Or think about Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness. It seemed like a waste of time, but God was preparing him to lead His people. Now, I'm not suggesting that every inconvenience is a divine message. Sometimes a traffic jam is just a traffic jam. But when you notice a pattern of delays or unexpected changes that end up protecting you or leading you to something better, that's when you might see God's hand at work. I remember a time when I was all set to start a new job with the contract in hand and ready to sign. But then, delay after delay kept cropping up, and I was so frustrated. A few months later, that company went bankrupt. If I had signed on, I would have been left out in the cold. That's the thing about God's protection. It's not always about keeping us comfy. Sometimes it's about making us uncomfortable to guide us away from unseen dangers and toward unexpected blessings. So the next time your plans go awry, don't get disheartened. Step back and take a look around. God might be protecting you from something you can't see or guiding you toward a blessing you hadn't anticipated. Those so-called divine detours might turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Now, you might be wondering how to tell the difference between a divine detour and just plain bad luck. That's where our next sign comes in. It's all about the comfort of community, and it's going to shift the way you perceive God's protection in your daily life. The comfort of community. You might be thinking, all these signs are great, But what if I'm still feeling alone in my struggles? That's where this next sign comes in, and it's a powerful one. It's all about the comfort of community. Sometimes, God's protection doesn't come as a dramatic revelation or a quiet whisper. It comes through the people He places around us. I'm talking about your church family, your friends, or even that neighbor who always seems to show up when you need a hand. God didn't create just one person and call it a day for a reason. He knew we'd need each other. That's why He said it wasn't good for man to be alone. He made us for community, and often that's how He shows His protection. I remember a tough time when I was struggling, bills piling up, health issues, and feeling like I was sinking. But then, my church family rallied around me. They brought meals, helped with bills, and even mowed my lawn. That's God's protection working through His people. The Bible is full of examples of this kind of support. Think about Ruth and Naomi. When Naomi lost everything, Ruth stayed by her side. Or look at the early church in Acts. They shared everything they had to make sure no one was in need. That's God's protection in action through the power of community. Here's the thing. This kind of protection requires something from us as well. We need to be open to letting people in, humble enough to accept help when we need it, and ready to offer support to others when the time comes. You might be thinking, I don't have a community like that. But let me reassure you, God has a place for you. Maybe it's time to connect with that small group at church you've been avoiding. Or perhaps it's time for you to start building your own community. When we come together as believers, we become a powerful force. We become the hands and feet of God, protecting and caring for one another. That's why the Bible emphasizes the importance of meeting together. It's not just about singing songs and hearing sermons, but about supporting and protecting each other. So, next time you're feeling alone, remember this sign. Take a look around. Who has God placed in your life? Who can you reach out to? And who might need you to be their protector right now? You might be asking, how do all these signs fit together? What's the bigger picture? That's where our next point comes in, connecting the dots. You're going to be amazed when you see how God has been working in your life all along. Connecting the dots is like piecing together a puzzle. Each sign is meaningful on its own, but when you put them together, you start to see the bigger picture of God's protection. Think about it. That whisper of peace you feel during a storm often comes when doors are closing and new windows are opening. God gives you that calm to help you spot the new opportunities. And what about that guiding light of wisdom? It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It often comes through those unlikely guardians God places in your life. That neighbor who showed up with groceries. They might have the very word of wisdom you need to see things differently. Let us dive into the power of the shield of faith. It's not just a feel-good concept, it's your secret weapon for navigating those unexpected divine detours. When your plans go awry, it's your faith that anchors you, helping you trust that there's a greater purpose behind the delays. And here's the magic. Being part of a supportive community supercharges that faith. When you have fellow believers standing by your side, cheering you on, holding up that shield of faith becomes so much easier. These signs you encounter aren't just random coincidences. They're all woven together in God's grand design to guide, protect, and help you grow. Take a moment to reflect on your life. Can you spot how these signs are appearing for you? Maybe you've been focusing on just a few, but now you can start to see the bigger picture. Remember that unexpected peace you felt. Was there a closed door or a new opportunity that followed? Or think about that person who always seems to offer the perfect advice. Have they helped you navigate a divine detour? Here's the thing. God's protection isn't just about one grand miracle. It's the little things working together seamlessly. It's the peace that settles in your heart, the wisdom that guides your thoughts, the faith that fuels your spirit, and the supportive people around you. All of these combine to keep you right where God wants you. So, the next time you're questioning whether God is protecting you, don't just wait for a single big sign. Look for all the small signs working in harmony. Start connecting the dots, and you'll see just how deeply God has been involved in your life. You might be thinking, this all sounds good, but is there a key to truly understanding God's protection? Well, let me share something that might shift your perspective, the often overlooked aspect. You may wonder, Pastor, with all these signs you've mentioned, what else could there be? The truth is, there's a crucial element we often miss, and it can completely transform how you view God's protection. We often imagine God's protection as a shield that He places around us and then leaves alone. But that's not quite it. God's protection is dynamic, it's ongoing and ever adapting. Just like a parent who continuously watches over and adjusts their care for their child, God is always actively working, shifting, and tailoring His protection to meet your needs. Isn't that incredible? It means God isn't just passively observing from above. He's actively engaged in every moment of your life. Imagine this: God is right there with us, guiding our steps, clearing our path, and shielding us from unseen dangers. You might be wondering, if God's protecting me, why do bad things still happen? That's a valid question. But remember, God's protection isn't about creating a perfect life. It's about guiding us through the imperfect moments. Think about it like teaching a child to ride a bike. The parent doesn't hold the bike up the entire time. They let the child wobble and fall, but they're always ready to catch them if needed. That's how God works, allowing us to learn and grow while being ready to step in when necessary. This means we need to shift our perspective on faith. It's not just about believing in protection, but actively looking for it. Trust that even when you can't see it, God is working things out for your good. In your daily life, this means being more aware. If things don't go your way, instead of getting frustrated, ask yourself, what might God be protecting me from? When you meet someone new, think, could this person be one of God's unexpected guardians? When we start to see God's protection as an active and ongoing process, we notice His hand in places we didn't before and trust Him more, even when things seem unclear. So, from today, start viewing your life differently. Don't just wait for big miracles. Look for the small ways God is actively protecting you every day. Observe how He's guiding, shaping, and growing you. Remember, God's protection isn't about just keeping bad things away. It's about working everything together for your good, as Romans 8:28 says. His protection isn't passive, it's active, ongoing, and happening right now, whether you realize it or not. Living under the wings of protection. So you might be asking, Pastor, this all sounds great, but how do I actually experience God's protection in my daily life? That's exactly what we're diving into now. Living under the wings of the Almighty isn't just a comforting phrase, it's a way of life. First things first, we need to open our eyes. God's protection is all around us, but if we're not looking for it, we might miss it entirely. Start your day by asking God to reveal His protection to you, and then keep your eyes peeled. That unexpected peace you feel when chaos surrounds you, that's God at work. That friend who calls just when you need them, that's another sign of God's hand in your life. But it's not enough to just see it. We need to fully embrace it. When you feel that peace, don't just overlook it. Thank God for it. When someone lends you a hand, don't chalk it up to luck. Recognize it as God's grace in action. Now you might be thinking, but Pastor, I don't always feel protected. I feel alone. Here's the thing. God's protection might not always look how we expect. Sometimes it appears as a closed door or a tough challenge. But know this, God is with you through it all. To cultivate a deeper awareness of God's guardianship, dive into the Bible. It's filled with stories of God's protection. Read them, study them, and let them resonate in your heart. And pray, talk to God like He's right there with you because He is. Share your experiences with others. When you see God's protection in your life, tell someone. It will not only strengthen your faith, but theirs as well. Remember, we're all in this together. Here's a simple practice to help you experience God's protection daily. Each night before bed, reflect on your day. Where did you see God's hand in action? Maybe it was that close call on the road, or a conversation that uplifted your spirits. Jot it down if you need to. Then, each morning, take a moment to ask God to reveal His protection to you. Ask Him to open your eyes to see it, and then approach your day with the expectation of spotting it. Living under God's wings isn't always a smooth ride. We might face challenges and tough times, but remember, God is with you every step of the way. He's guiding, protecting, and helping you grow. So, start viewing your life with new eyes. Don't wait for grand miracles. Look for the small ways God is protecting you every day. Notice how He's guiding, shaping, and growing you. God's protection isn't just about keeping bad things away. It's about actively working everything together for your good. As Romans 8:28 teaches, God is actively at work in your life right now, protecting you in ways you might not even see. So, when you question if God is watching out for you, remember this. His protection isn't passive. It's an active, ongoing process happening in your life right now, whether you realize it or not. A fresh take on divine protection. You might be wondering, Pastor, all these signs sound great, but what does it really mean for me? Let me explain. Understanding these 7 signs of God's protection can completely transform your life. It's not just about feeling safe. It's about recognizing God's hand in every aspect of your journey. Remember that unexpected sign we discussed? That's a crucial clue. God's protection often appears in surprising ways. It's not just about dodging trouble. Sometimes it's about growing through challenges. This new perspective will change the way you experience your faith. You'll start noticing God's protection in the small moments, the missed appointment, the surprise phone call. That's God actively working in your life. So here's your challenge. Start searching for these signs in your own life. Be courageous in your faith. Trust that God is protecting you even when it's not obvious. When you live under God's protection, you'll find the strength to face whatever comes your way.